Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome into another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It is Thursday, May 13th. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We got a fantastic episode lined up for you here. Hopefully you've had a great week so far. We're cruising right along the middle of May already. It's crazy how time flies when you got baseball going on every day. Quality matchups, crazy things happening out there. It's just a ton of fun to follow along and share the latest information with you guys out there. So once again, I love all you guys listening, and I do appreciate you tuning in so I can continue to have fun and talk baseball with you guys twice a week. But we got a great show lined up for you here today. Of course, we got news out of Oakland to discuss. I know you guys have heard about it by now, but I'm going to give you my take on everything that's going on. We're then going to jump into our standard Thursday weekly routine of checking in on the college game. What happened this past weekend? Any upsets? Any changes in the top 25? What's happening out there? Let's dive in and check it out. Then we're going to look at some of the league leaders across the board, give you guys an update. It's been a couple of weeks since we checked out who's leading the league in home runs, average, ERA, wins, saves, all of that good stuff. And then at the end of the episode, talk about the games this past week and ultimately where things stand and any great performances that have happened out there. But looking at this Oakland A situation, it's honestly kind of fascinating, and I really think this is just a power play from Major League Baseball, because when I read the headline, it got me to thinking, I mean, how many teams have actually relocated in Major League Baseball history, right? Off the top of my head, the big ones that come to mind are the Brooklyn Dodgers to the LA Dodgers. You got the Milwaukee Braves to the Atlanta Braves, and of course the most recent one, the Expos, became the Washington Nationals. And being a Phillies fan in the National League East, that one hit home because I watch the Nationals all the time, right? I watch the Nationals here tonight on Wednesday play my Fightin' Phils. So I really wanted to do some research and figure out how many teams have actually relocated here in the past, and if it's a common occurrence across Major League Baseball. Or again, if this is just baseball kind of wielding their power with the local government to say, hey, figure this out because we're actually not going to move. We're just going to put it out there into the news, into the world, so people hear this and start to get upset with you and you actually take some action on the legislation for the new stadium out there in Oakland. So doing some research, of course, the most recent one is, in fact, the Expos becoming the Nationals in 2004. They made this move citing poor attendance and a desire for a new ballpark, but prior to that was actually the Washington Senators becoming the Texas Rangers back in 1971. So really in 50 years, it's only happened one time. So if you're under the age of 50, you've only seen one organization relocate in baseball. A lot of this took place a long time ago, before baseball popularity took off, before there were TV contracts, before there were radio contracts, regional games, national games, before the game really became the money-making machine that it is today. This is when teams were relocating, when attendance and being in person was really the only revenue stream. There wasn't a ton of merchandise being sold back then, or at least not to the length it is today through Fanatics and all the different websites out there where you can get some gear. So just looking at the history, I mean, all the way back, the Philadelphia Athletics became the Kansas City Athletics, the Oakland Athletics back in 1954. The New York Giants became the San Francisco Giants. The Dodgers became the LA Dodgers in 57. But since 1960, you've had the Washington Senators move to Minneapolis, the Milwaukee Braves become the Atlanta Braves, and the Seattle Pilots become the Milwaukee Brewers. So again, this doesn't happen often, right? So it's not like, they can reference, hey, we're going to do this like the Expos did and move to Washington if you guys don't, figure things out and start to put some money together for this new ballpark. It really is, in my estimation, just more of a power play to kind of get the local government to say, hey, again, we're going to put this out there so people are going to become upset at you, and you're going to start to get the wheels in motion on voting on this new ballpark. And what I don't understand is if you go out and you Google kind of renderings or drawings of this new ballpark, it certainly looks like a fantastic ballpark. And the benefit of it to Oakland is it's not just going to be a baseball stadium. They're not just saying, hey, we need to build this facility just so our team, the Oakland Athletics, can have a nicer place to play, because the Coliseum really is a dog hole. It is not nice, right? It's one of the oldest stadiums out there. Used to be a multi-purpose facility with the Oakland Raiders, and now it is just baseball, so it's not set up for everything that baseball needs or the best viewing experience of a baseball game like some of these new stadiums. Citizens Bank, PNC Park, where you can watch the game from any part of the stadium, walk around, see the city in the background. Like, none of these amenities are part of the current stadium out there in Oakland. So it really is just like, come on, guys, why wouldn't you want to do this? Especially, like I mentioned, because the drawings have an apartment complex attached to it. There's a local park area that's going to be right around it so people can go to all the time. There's going to be a promenade on the waterfront, so there's going to be shops and stores and restaurants. And this would really bring a ton of economic value out there to Oakland that they currently don't have right now. Now, yes, it's going to cost the taxpayers a decent amount of coin, but still, Oakland right now is not a destination city for anybody out there. And a lot of this is due to other organizations leaving town, right? I mentioned the Raiders. Well, they got up and left and paid a relocation fee to go to Las Vegas. They just built the Death Star out there in Las Vegas. That's an awesome-looking stadium. So their owner, Mr. Davis, right, Al Davis' son, Mark Davis, basically came out and said, I don't want to be rude, but it's to be expected. The city of Oakland, we were trying to get a win-win with the city of Oakland, and we just couldn't get it done. So it was just a matter of time until this came up once again with the A's. And that's completely unfortunate, again, for the city, right? So the Raiders leave town. Then you also have the Golden State Warriors, who used to play in Oakland, and now they're across the bay in San Francisco. They're still the Golden State Warriors because it's the same area, but they're no longer in Oakland. So you've had two professional sports teams leave your city. The only one you have left is the Oakland A's, who are actually a very good ball club, even though they're full of money ball, not paying big-time people because they don't have any money because nobody goes to the game. So this team that doesn't have any revenue stream somehow wins all the time still, and you don't want to put any money into them to make them even better, right? Imagine the free agent destination of playing in a beautiful city and a beautiful ballpark. You can live in the apartments right next door. You can go work out whenever you want. Your wife or girlfriend can go shopping on the waterfront. She can eat at 5-star restaurants with excellent chefs. You would attract top talent with all the amenities locally there in Oakland. It would also liven up the area, right? Just the economic value. I don't understand kind of what the pushback and what the problem is. The Raiders leave, the Warriors leave, and now the A's are threatening to leave. And if they don't have that, what is there to do in Oakland? What's the reason to go visit Oakland? It would be an area where I'd go, okay, if I'm on the West Coast, let's go check out that stadium. Let's go spend some money in the city of Oakland. Let's go have a nice dinner and bring in some tourist attractions and some tourist individuals into your city to grow economically. I don't understand why the city is taking so long to potentially vote on this and not realizing the benefits ultimately that would come from a potential new stadium, shops, park, apartment complex, just a beautiful area and beautiful drawings. You guys should Google them and check them out. So they're absolutely gorgeous right on the water there in Oakland. So ultimately, if they can't get it done and the A's do have to relocate, the next question is, okay, where do they end up, right? I talked to you guys last year during the pandemic when we were basically trying to figure out anything and everything to talk about twice a week since there wasn't actually baseball a year ago at this point. I brought up the potential expansion cities in Major League Baseball. It's come out since, Commissioner Bobby Manfred, he basically said we're not going to have an expansion team until the Rays and now the A's get themselves new ballparks. Because, again, we're not going to go expansion team. We're just going to relocate one of our teams if we can't get new ballparks. So where are the top 5 cities to potentially be relocated? And the top 5 cities for expansion teams is pretty much the same list. I mean, it's eerily similar when you look at some of the articles of people talking about of places that they think the A's could end up. And if you Google expansion cities, it's going to be a very, very similar list. And at the top of the list, of course, is Las Vegas, because Las Vegas is doing the opposite of Oakland, right? They've added 2 professional sports teams within the last 5 years. You have the Oakland Raiders, who have come to town, and they're going to start there next year, or this year, this coming fall in 2021. It's going to be their first year into the new city. And then just a number of years ago, you have the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the NHL team, recently came to town, and in their first year, coming off the expansion draft, made it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. And you have their pregame theatrics, right? They almost put on a performance and a play for pregame, and the stadium sold out. It's loud as heck. It's just an awesome atmosphere. So there's cities out there dying for these teams, and you got cities like Oakland that are just like, you know what? Who cares? We're just going to sit on it. It doesn't make sense to me. So Las Vegas, I would certainly put at the top of the list. They have the Raiders to lean on to ask them how they kind of went about this and what, the top steps would be in relocating, how to go about it all. So if you want to stay on the West Coast, you also have Las Vegas. The next one on the list could be Portland, Oregon. I mean, Portland's been out there. It's close to Seattle, where they have, a rivalry within the division. There's also an established local effort out in Portland to build a waterfront stadium. So, again, the locals would welcome a new team out in Portland, and that would just be, a beautiful stadium. They got the Trailblazers up there, so they have a professional team, but they're looking to add another one. In soccer, they got a fantastic professional soccer team in Portland. So, again, that city is just continuing to improve, continuing to boom, and it could be an option for the Oakland A's. But you also have San Jose out there, right? You got the San Jose Sharks. They got the hockey team. It's right next to the San Francisco Giants. So that's a rivalry that goes back and forth on the baseball side of things. And then you start to talk about the East Coast, where the expansion cities usually don't make as much sense for the Oakland A's, but make more sense potentially for the Rays if they were to relocate, although I think the Rays do want to stay down there in Florida. But you have Charlotte, North Carolina. That's one where a lot of people are saying it could be up for a team coming here, in the near future. But the biggest one, and the one that I think makes the most sense, and one that I am just waiting for and would die to go visit, is Nashville, Tennessee. I mean, Nashville's got to get a Major League Baseball team. There's already been a group of individuals pushing to get Major League Baseball into the city of Nashville. This group includes the likes of Justin Timberlake, even Dave Dombrowski. Until he took the Phillies general manager job, it was rumored that he wasn't going to be a GM because he was trying to get together people to get a team in Nashville. And then ultimately that started to fall through. It looked like it was a little bit further out than they had anticipated. So he ended up taking the Phillies job. But there is money and powerful individuals behind a potential move to Nashville for Major League Baseball teams. And, man, if you put that right there on Main Street, right on Broad Street in Nashville, you also have the Nashville Predators, the hockey team that's been very good there, the Tennessee Titans. The NFL team is based right outside of Nashville, so you have multiple professional sports teams. We saw the NFL draft be held in Nashville last year or the year before. I get them mixed up now. Dallas was in there, Nashville. I think it may have even been 3 years ago at this point. For Nashville, just due to coronavirus shutting down last year. But the amount of people that were there supporting that, it's just a raucous town, a crowd. You got all the country stars. You got big names. There's just a ton of economic value going on in Nashville, where I think they get a baseball team sooner than later. But some outside of the box potential cities. I mean, I've seen rumors on the internet of Salt Lake City. You got the Jazz out there. There's a lot of minor league baseball out in the state of Utah. they'd be looking to bring in a professional team. They feel like they'd support it. A lot of people would go, but for the Jazz, they've always had trouble attracting top talent because what is there to do in Salt Lake? Basically everybody says you got to pay everybody a lot of extra money to play for the Jazz, and I don't think Major League Baseball is looking for that type of organization out there as well. And then you see the city of Montreal as well. Again, they lost the Expos to Washington, and they're looking to get another Canadian team potentially, back into the fold. You got the Toronto, but that's about it. Of course, the NHL, multiple NHL teams, so get more baseball up into Canada. Now, again, coronavirus complicates things, but hopefully that'll be over sooner than later, and we can figure that out with, Canada, U.S. going back and forth and not having to kind of quarantine for 2 weeks at a time here. But truly, at the end of the day, I think the A's stay in Oakland. I think the city figures it out because they can't lose their third and final professional sports team. But since it's happened twice already, it wouldn't surprise me if ultimately they go that direction. But I do think they would stay out west. I think Portland, San Jose, one of those cities out on the West Coast makes the most sense. So baseball doesn't have to, reshuffle all the divisions and kind of keep some continuity within the sport itself moving forward. But what do you guys think? Do you think the A's are going to stay out there, or do you think they ultimately move? Leave a comment of what city you think they end up in. I'd love to hear from you on ultimately what you think the end conclusion is to this latest drama with the A's, the city of Oakland, and Major League Baseball. But that'll do it here for segment number 1 of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll step aside here now for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, we're going to talk college baseball. Stick around, everyone. We'll be right back after this.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Back to the second segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate you guys tuning in. It is now time for our college baseball segment. You guys know the drill. Every Thursday, I like to take you guys through the top 25, see if there's been any changes, who are the teams on the move, what's going on as we get closer to the regionals being released here. And I also saw a tweet that said the 20 NCAA regional host options will be unveiled either Thursday or Friday of this week. So the championship oversight panel is going to take a look and limit it down to 20 to ultimately get to the potential 16 here in the next couple of days. So that'll be big-time news to see which teams are going to be hosting the regionals here and moving forward. But before we get into the top 25, I will ask you guys to check us out on social media. Head to Facebook, head to Twitter. Check out the GSMC Baseball Podcast. We got ourselves a Facebook page where you can hit like, hit follow. That way you guys get, in your news feed, your homepage, you'll see all the new posts and everything we put on that page. And then on Twitter, hit follow of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, and you'll get to see the latest takes from not only myself, but the other hosts within the Baseball Podcast as well. We'll keep you up to date on everything going on out there across Major League Baseball. We really appreciate it. I know there's a ton of you guys listening out there who don't follow us as of now, so do me a favor, hit that little blue bird, that little Twitter icon on your iPhone, Android, wherever you're at, and give us a follow. I certainly appreciate it. But looking at the top 25 now, the top of the list, the top two remain unchanged. We got the Arkansas Razorbacks at number 1. They went 2-1 last week, so they remain the top team. They took 2 out of 3 against Georgia. Next up, they'll face Tennessee in what is a number 1 versus number 4 matchup. So, spoiler alert, Tennessee is number 4. They went 3-0 last week. They move up from number 5 to number 4 after a sweep at Missouri. So they'll now face off in what will be a fantastic SEC matchup this coming weekend. I mean, the SEC just gives you no weekends off. How many times, how many weeks in a row have I talked to you guys saying that, oh, 1's playing 3, 2's playing 4, 7 versus 11, whatever it may be. The SEC just continues to put out fantastic baseball series. So if you guys aren't following along yet, do yourself a favor. Check out that SEC network, and you're going to watch some of the best college baseball there is to offer, because right now, 1 through 4, all in the SEC. Number 2 is Vanderbilt. They remain there after a 2-1 weekend. They took 2 out of 3 against Alabama. 2-0 against Alabama. And then one game got canceled due to inclement weather. So they swept Alabama in a 2-game series. And next up, they'll take on Ole Miss, the Runnin' Rebels. They'll travel to Ole Miss this weekend. And now there's only 2 weeks left in the regular season here. So only 2 more series to potentially catch some of the best baseball before ultimately we head to the postseason and we head to regionals. The number 3 team, Mississippi State, the Bulldogs. They went, 3-1 this past week. They were able to win another conference series at South Carolina. So they took the first 2 before ultimately losing Game 3 by a score of 4-3. And they'll now return home to face Missouri this upcoming weekend. The Big 12 then shows up here in the next couple of teams being ranked. 5, 6, and 7 all come from via the Big 12. Texas, the Longhorns, they're the first ones at number 5. They went 3-1 last week. They move up from number 6 up to number 5. They've been on a winning streak. They did win 2 out of 3 against TCU. So 5-6 played this past weekend as TCU is the 6th-ranked team. But Texas will take on West Virginia. They'll have themselves the weekend off this weekend before finishing up the conference slate versus West Virginia in a couple of weekends. Like I said, TCU, they fall from number 3 to number 6 after dropping the weekend series to Texas, and Texas is now the top-ranked team in the Big 12. TCU will go out of conference to face Louisiana Monroe before wrapping up the conference slate against Kansas State in a couple of weeks. The 7th-ranked team, the Texas Tech Red Raiders, they only played 1 game this past week. They move up from number 8 to number 7. They dealt with some COVID issues against Illinois Chicago, so they didn't play that series. They did win a midweek game against Oklahoma, and they now have 3 more coming up against Oklahoma. That was a makeup game on Tuesday, and they'll now travel to Oklahoma to face the Sooners this weekend and wrap up the conference against Kansas a weekend later. The 8th-ranked team, you got the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They fall from number 7 to number 8 after a 1-2 weekend. They lost the series to Florida State, who's been playing better baseball of late. And now they'll finish up. They got this weekend off, and they'll finish up at Virginia Tech next weekend to finish up their ACC slate. So a few teams have this weekend off as some other teams have to catch up on the schedule from games that have been canceled earlier on. But at number 9, you got the Florida Gators. Florida, they moved up from 10 to number 9 after a 3-1 week. They were able to win their series at Kentucky, and they'll face Georgia this next upcoming weekend before wrapping up at Arkansas. So Arkansas continues to just run the gauntlet and stay at number 1. Very impressive there in the SEC. The Oregon Ducks at number 10, they're up from number 11 after having themselves a 3-0 week. They swept Washington over the weekend. They'll now face Utah coming up here as the Pac-10 or Pac-12 has a couple of more weeks left in the regular season. They go through the end of May, while some of the other conferences were able to start earlier and wrap things up here sooner rather than later. At number 11, you got the East Carolina Pirates. They move up from number 13 to number 11. Had themselves a 3-1 week this past week as they took 3 out of 4 against Tulane. They'll now travel to Cincinnati before finishing up at South Florida. So 8 road games to end the year for East Carolina, and that'll be a tough stretch here as they wrap up their schedule. The Stanford Cardinal continue to climb. They're all the way up to number 12 from number 16. After a 2-1 week, they were able to win a series against Arizona as well as a victory against San Jose State during the week here. They face Carolina for 4 games. So not Carolina, California for 4 games coming up here this weekend. As, again, Pac-12 has 3 more conference series remaining before finishing up their schedule. Arizona is the 13th ranked team. They fall from number 9 to number 13 after a 2-2 week. So a tough stretch there. They lost 2 out of 3 to Stanford, as well as a midweek loss during the week. And they'll now face Washington, coming off a series loss. So Arizona will look to get back on track against Washington. Louisiana Tech, they are currently number 14. They remain 14 after only playing 2 games this past week. They had some COVID issues. Not sure if it was within their program or whoever they were facing off against, as well as some weather complications. They lost a midweek game against LSU, but they'll now have 4 games against UTSA, Texas San Antonio, and then a couple at Old Dominion before they wrap up here in the next couple of weeks. The Louisville Cardinal, they will be number 15 here in the rankings. They stay at 15 from last week as well. Let's see. They went 3-1 this past weekend in the ACC. They took 2 of 3 against Duke and also beat Vanderbilt during the week last week. So a nice win by Louisville against Vanderbilt, as they will now travel to North Carolina to face off against the Tar Heels, as they have 2 weekends remaining in the ACC schedule. The Pitt Panthers are number 16. They actually climbed in the rankings after only going 2-2 this past week. Tough stretch for them, but still, based on everybody else around them, were able to climb. They took 2 out of 3 against Boston College and had a loss to West Virginia, a non-conference loss to West Virginia mixed in there, as they will now return home to face NC State in their next conference matchup before wrapping up at Wake Forest. Both of those series winnable for the Pitt Panthers as they look to host a regional series here for the first time in a long time in program history. The Florida State Seminoles, they're up from number 18 to number 17. They went 2-1. Again, took the series over Florida Gulf Coast and Notre Dame this past week. They had a makeup series against Florida Gulf Coast, but taking 2 out of 3 over Notre Dame allowed them to climb in the rankings, and they'll now face off against Clemson at home this weekend in a nice matchup. Always a lot of fun when Florida State and Clemson get together. Doesn't matter whether it's baseball, football, whatever sport it is. It's always fun to watch those teams go at it. At number 18, you have Ole Miss. They fall from number 12 all the way to 18 after a 2-2 week. So they were one of the biggest losers this past week. They lost the series against Texas A&M and also had some trouble during their midweek games, and they will now face off against number 2 Vanderbilt. It will be at home at Ole Miss. 2 of these games will be on the SEC network. So like I mentioned, you guys out there who get the SEC network, make sure to tune into that one, as they have Vanderbilt in Georgia left on the schedule there at Ole Miss. At number 19, you have Southern Miss. They're up from number 20. Another good week for them. They went 4-1 against, let's see here, Middle Tennessee State. They swept Middle Tennessee State in 4 games. There was also a no-hitter thrown by Walker Powell on Saturday night's first game, or Saturday, I guess, day's first game before the night action, but a 6-0 victory and a no-hitter for Walker Powell being thrown. A fantastic weekend for Southern Miss. And, I always find myself rooting for Southern Miss, even though when we played them back in my day in college, they kicked the living crap out of us. They beat us up pretty good, scores of 18-3, 15-6, or whatever it was. But it was a lot of fun. It was a great place to play, a fantastic atmosphere. So I always end up rooting for them here a little bit, even though I probably should have some hard feelings left in the tank. Charlotte, they moved back up from 23 to 20. They had themselves a 4-0 week, and they are 22-6 in Conference USA play this year. They swept Marshall this past weekend, and moving forward, they will have 4 games at Rice here this weekend, and should be a nice test, as Rice usually has a pretty solid ball club down there out of the state of Texas. Indiana comes in at number 21, the first Big Ten team in the rankings here is the Indiana Hoosiers. They're up from number 24 to 21 after a 3-1 week, 23-10 overall, and 23-10 in conference. As, again, the Big Ten is only playing conference, folks. They took 2 games against Rutgers, split against Nebraska, and they now have 3 games at Michigan coming up. Sunday's game will be on ESPN2. So if you don't get the SEC network and you still want to watch some college baseball, tune into ESPN2 on Sunday. You'll see Indiana and Michigan going at it. But Michigan's been ranked earlier this year. They've fallen out after a tough stretch. But the first Big Ten team coming in at number 21 really goes to show a bit of a down year there in the North Conference up in Big Ten and just how the SEC, ACC are running the college baseball world. At number 22, you have Gonzaga. They fall from 21 to 22 after having the week off due to COVID issues. They had their games against Oregon postponed as well. They're scheduled to play Portland this next weekend, but who knows if they'll make up some games from conference play because it's been since the end of April since they've played. So Gonzaga having trouble getting their games played due to some COVID protocol going on within the program, and that's a tough break for Gonzaga. At number 23, you have UCLA. They're up from 25 to 23 after a 2-1 week. They're 14-10 overall in Pac-10 play. They took 2 out of 3 against Washington State. Next up, they will go out of conference to face UC Santa Barbara before coming back into conference the last 2 weekends to face Cal as well as Arizona State. At number 24, you have UC Irvine. They're in the rankings here, I believe, for the first time. They were not ranked this past week, but went 3-1 out in the Big West Conference. 29-15 overall, 21-7 in the Big West Conference here as they swept or took 3 out of 4 from UC Santa Barbara. So a nice weekend there. They had split with Long Beach State the weekend prior, and they also have 3 series left. They'll face UC Riverside, CSU Bakersfield, and then wrap things up with Cal State Fullerton at the end of the month to conclude their schedule. And then number 25, the South Carolina Gamecocks. They fall from 19 down to 25. Had themselves a 2-2 week, and they're now 12-12 overall in the SEC. So a bit of a down year for the Gamecocks, but still in the top 25 as they lost 2 out of 3 to Mississippi State. But, of course, Mississippi State, a top 5 team, so not the worst series there to get 2 out of 3, but the loss at Clemson during the middle of the week is what really marked them down. They will now travel to Kentucky for 3 games and then wrap things up with a top 5 team in Tennessee at the end of their schedule. The only team that dropped out of the rankings this week was Old Dominion. They fall from 22 to the land of unranked as they went 2-2. They're 33-13 overall, but a tough stretch here of late as they split with UTSA. Won game 1, lost games 2 and 3 before ultimately salvaging a split in game 4. They have 4 games coming up this weekend with Western Kentucky and then 2 games with Louisiana Tech to wrap up their schedule. So overall, the SEC continues to reign supreme, the top 4 teams. Then you got the Big 12 at 5, 6, 7 before the ACC starts to sprinkle in, as well as the Pac-10. And those teams certainly seem like the top conferences. But check out the SEC network, check out the family of ESPN, and you're going to start seeing more college baseball as we wind things down here as the end of the regular season becomes close. But that'll do it for college baseball talk here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll step aside for another word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, we're going to talk individual statistics. Who's leading the Major League in home runs? Stick around and find out.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello again, and thanks for listening to segment number 3 of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate you guys tuning in. If you haven't taken a second, please do so now. Rate and review the podcast. I know I ask you guys twice a week, every episode. You guys have heard it by now. But please hit that like, hit subscribe, hit the 5th star there on Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to this. Leave us a comment. I want to hear from you guys. I talk to you guys twice a week for an hour and 15 minutes at a time. I want to hear some of your intake. I want to hear some of your input. If you're not going to follow us on Facebook and write on the wall there so you can let us know your comment, do it here now. Whether it's whether it's YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever it is, rate and review the podcast. That goes a long way for continuing to help us grow here within the Baseball Podcast. We love giving you guys content on a daily basis, so just return the favor just a little bit and hit that 5th star wherever you're listening. We do appreciate it. And if you guys haven't checked out the other shows within the podcast network, obviously you guys enjoy baseball because you're listening to this, but I know you got some other hobbies, you got some other interests, whatever those may be. There's a podcast for you guys. If you like to read, there's a books podcast. If you like racing, there's a car podcast. If you're into politics, there's a news podcast. There's a weird news podcast. There's movies. There's other sports. The NFL, they just released their schedule here on Wednesday night. If you want to hear some takes on ultimately what your team's going to finish, head to the football podcast. I mean, I know my Birds, my Philadelphia Eagles, we're going 10-7, double-digit wins. Nobody thinks so. Looking at the schedule, tough beginning, awesome finish. They're going to win double-digit games. But if you want to hear more about that stuff, check out the other shows within the podcast network, and you guys won't be disappointed. There's about 25 different shows, so whatever it is you're into, we got you covered here under the umbrella of the podcast network. But let's look at some individual stats. It's been a minute since I've talked to you guys about some individuals, some league leaders, some surprises, what's happening out there across the board. Here recording this late on Wednesday the 12th, so there could be some changes if somebody goes downtown, 4 or 5 times on the West Coast here. Maybe these fluctuate, but as of now, these look like the stats heading into Thursday the 13th. And your league leader in home runs is nobody other than Ronald Acuna. He's got 11 so far this year. He is in sole possession of first place. He's gotten hot here recently. He now has 11. But the next part of the list, those are the guys I thought. I didn't know Acuna was at the top of the list, and obviously he's having a fantastic year. I didn't think he was all the way to 11. But there are 4 guys tied in second place with 10. Starting off with J.D. Martinez. He's been hot all year long. Of course, he continues to rake. He continues to be excellent for the Red Sox. You also have Shohei Ohtani. I mean, Shohei Ohtani, what can you say about this guy? There's so many stats or records being broken. And honestly, I take some of them with a grain of salt, right? Because you see all these tweets, oh, he's the first guy since 1908, since 1920, since 1910 to have 10 home runs and 10-plus strikeouts in a game, or this, that, and the third. And it's like, yeah, obviously, nobody hits and pitches at the major league level. So, I mean, do I take it as, yeah, this guy's excellent and he's doing both very well here early on in the season? Yes, of course. I mean, he's got 10 home runs. He's hitting .257, 26 RBIs. He's also pitching quite well. But just people who tweet out, oh, he's the first guy with 10 home runs and 10-plus strikeouts in the history of baseball since 19 whatever. It's like, yeah, I mean, come on. We haven't seen a guy do this in 100 years. So, of course he is, right? Like, I don't want to take anything away from Shohei, but just some of them I do chuckle because I'm like, yeah, nobody does both, so of course he's the first guy since Babe Ruth. Nobody's done both since World War II, so of course it's going to be the first time since the 30s this has happened. I mean, come up with a statistic, pitching and hitting, 20 home runs, 20 whatever, and it's going to be the first time since somebody did it since Babe Ruth's era when they actually went both ways. So he is a ton of fun to watch. Don't get me wrong. I'm not taking a shot at him in any way, but I'm just saying, the people on Twitter, stop acting like you're flexing your muscles because you're saying, oh, look at this ridiculous stat about Shohei Ohtani. Just take a deep breath, grab an adult beverage, sit on the couch, and watch the guy play. Because he is absolutely entertaining. He's filthy on the mound. He's crushing baseballs. So stop trying to tweet out since 1905, this, and this, and just watch the game and enjoy yourself because the kid's a ton of fun to watch. You got Jose Ramirez with 10 home runs, also tied with second. And then one of the surprises I also have is Mitch Haniger, the right fielder for the Seattle Mariners, with 10 home runs here early on. He's at the top of the list there in second place. And certainly wouldn't have put any money on Mitch Haniger being potentially at the top of this list when the year started. You got a lot of guys with 9 home runs. It looks like, let's see here, 10 guys with 9 home runs, just running through the list. Chris Bryant, Jesus Aguilar, Byron Buxton, Nick Castellanos, Nelson Cruz, Rafael Devers, Freddie Freeman all the way up to 9 home runs. Adolis Garcia down in Texas, Giancarlo Stanton, Fernando Tatis Jr., and then even more with 8 home runs as we continue down. But your league leader right now, Ronald Acuna, the leader in the clubhouse with 11 as we head here to Thursday the 13th. Who's leading the league in RBIs? That would be J.D. Martinez. He's got 32. He is 1 ahead of Jose Abreu and Jesus Aguilar. So Aguilar down in Miami starting to figure things out and having himself a good year offensively so far. 9 home runs, 31 RBIs, hitting .293. Starting to come around. He's also got 16 walks to 21 strikeouts. That's one of the better ratios that you'll see for a power hitter at the top of the list here. Jose Abreu, like I said, Martinez leading it. And then you got 2 guys with 30. Rafael Devers, Yuri Gurriel for Houston down there, doing a nice job in the middle of that lineup. And then you start to taper off. Trey Mancini with 29. Jared Walsh, of course, who is the reason why Albert Pujols no longer owns the first base position out there in Anaheim. Having a good year, hitting, 328 with 7 home runs and 29 RBIs. Randall Grichuk with 28. Mitch Haniger, 27. David Peralta out in Arizona with 27. And those are your top 10 guys here in the list of RBIs. Let's look at triples. Have we had a lot of triples yet? David Peralta in Arizona has 5. He's at the top of the list. And then you got 4 guys with 3. Next, Akil Baddoo out in Detroit, the rookie out there, still having himself a good year. His average is back down, but 3 triples showing off the speed. Nikki Lopez, the shortstop for Kansas City, has 3. Chris Owings, second baseman for the Rockies. And Chris Taylor, the center fielder for the Dodgers, each with 3. So you got 5 guys with at least 3 triples here offensively. When it comes to doubles, Chris Bryant leads the league with 14. He's 1 ahead of Brian Reynolds, the left fielder for the Pittsburgh Pirates, who has 13. Nolan Arenado and Michael Brantley, each with 12, and then a handful of guys with 11. Mookie Betts, Xander Bogaerts, Rafael Devers, Adam Frazier, who was recently cut. No, he's still there. There was the other Frazier who was cut by the Pirates and got into it. Todd Frazier got into it with the media out there in Pittsburgh. Yuri Gurriel, Cedric Mullins, and Jorge Soler, each with 11 RBIs on the year. The most hits this year, that goes to Xander Bogaerts. How about teammates at the top of the list? Bogaerts has 46, and J.D. Martinez has 45 on the year. They are 1 and 2 in the league. Cedric Mullins from Baltimore also has 45. Yuri Gurriel with 44, and Adam Frazier with 43 as the top 5 in hits for the year. Runs scored, Ronald Acuna 32, J.D. Martinez 31, and then Bo Bichette makes it on the list for the first time with 29 runs scored. Leading the league in walks so far, Max Muncy out there in L.A. with 36 walks. Yasmani Grandal has 29, and then Carlos Santana in Kansas City continues to have a great eye at the plate with 28. Now, strikeouts. This is kind of the opposite. You don't want to be at the top of this list, but Joey Gallo, 55 strikeouts so far this year. He continues to swing and miss at an outrageous clip. You also have Mac Chapman with 52 and Eugenio Suarez with 50 out there in Cincinnati. Stolen bases, Whit Merrifield leads the league with 11 so far for the Kansas City Royals. And you have Ramon Laureano, the center fielder for the A's, with 8. And then a lot of guys with 7 following him up. Who's winning the batting title so far? We got Yerman Mercedes still at the top of the list, hitting .376. Of course, he had an 8-for-8 stretch early on, so that had him really at the top of the list, but he is back down to .376. He's leading the American League ahead of Mike Trout, who is at .355. Yordan Alvarez at .347 and Xander Bogaerts at .333. And then on the National League side of things, Jesse Winkler has himself a really big lead currently. He's hitting .375, so 1 point behind Mercedes, but leading the National League. And the next guy in the National League is Trey Turner, all the way down at .318, with JT Realmuto coming in third at .314. So a catcher there, third on the list in the National League. Mike Trout leads the league in OPS, 1150 at the top of the list. At 1101, you got Jesse Winkler, and then Chris Bryant at 1050. Ronald Acuna at 1043. Anything over 1,000 is certainly fantastic, as those guys currently lead the league. So quite a few names that you've seen on there. A few other guys have sprinkled in, but seems to be the usual cast of characters leading the league offensively. Now, when it comes to the pitching side of things, your ERA leader is Jacob Degrom. He is at .68, and it is fascinating. He's got 6 starts. He's got 5 decisions in those 6 starts. He's 3-2, so he's got 2 losses with a .68 ERA. I mean, how does that happen? He's given up 3 earned runs and only 6 total runs, so it's not like he's got a ton of unearned runs also scoring against him. He's given up 6 runs in 6 starts total, and the guy's got 2 losses. I mean, pick it up, New York Mets offense. You guys are killing Jacob Degrom. This guy should be 20-2 every year, and he's 3-2 here through the middle of May, allowing 6 total runs, only 3 of them earned in 40 innings pitched. The opponents are hitting 128 off the guy, and somehow the other team has won 2 games while he's been in there. Just fascinating. John Means for Baltimore, second in the league in ERA. Fantastic for John. Of course, he had the no-hitter. That was thrown last week, but he is 4-0 with a 1.21 ERA. He's given up 7 earned runs in 52 innings this year. Just a tremendous, tremendous story for John Means here. Garrett Cole's next with a 1.37 ERA. He's given up 8 earned runs in 52 2/3 of an inning. Brandon Woodruff, 1.64. Trevor Rogers down in Miami, 1.89. Matthew Boyd in Detroit. Wow, he's pitched himself onto the market. I mean, they tried to trade him last year. Couldn't get anything for him because of how bad he was. But he's certainly going to get moved this year with a 1.94 ERA in 41 innings. Danny Duffy, a 1.94 ERA. And then Kevin Gausman at 1.97. As you have 8 guys with an ERA under 2 here when it comes to the starting staffs. Who leads the league in victories? That would be Jack Flaherty. He's 6-0 for St. Louis with a 2.83 ERA. Aaron Savali has 5 wins. Garrett Cole, 5. Clayton Kershaw, 5. Steven Matz has 5. Nick Pivetta, 5-0, 3.19 ERA for Boston. They certainly have won that trade with the Philadelphia Phillies. He was never that good in Philadelphia. Carlos Rodon, 5-0, and Eduardo Rodriguez coming back off a year where he missed because of COVID at 5-1. And, of course, Boston has the most victories, so 10 between Pivetta and Rodriguez. Fantastic start for the Red Sox pitching staff. Let's see here. Who leads the league in saves as we continue down? That's Mark Melancon out in San Diego. He is 12 for 12 on save opportunities, has yet to blow a save. Ian Kennedy down in Texas is 10 for 10. He's been fantastic for the Rangers. Jake McGee out in San Francisco. He's got 10 saves and 11 chances. And Alex Reyes for St. Louis also has 10 saves. So good start there for the bullpen guys. Shane Bieber leads the league in innings pitched at 55 through 8 starts. You got a handful of guys over 50. Zach Wheeler, Garrett Cole, John Means, and Trevor Bauer have all hit the 50-start mark here in the 2021 season, or 50-inning mark. And the amount of home runs allowed, Mike Fultonevich, he's allowed the most with 11, tied with Kyle Hendricks, who seems to be broken for the Cubs. He's got a 6.23 ERA. Patrick Corbin, also broken for the Nationals, 10 home runs, 7.36 ERA in 6 starts. So that signing does not look good for Washington here a few years into it. Strikeouts, your league leader, Garrett Cole, or no, he's second actually, Shane Bieber has passed him with 85 in 55 innings and 8 starts. Garrett Cole has 78 in 8 starts. Tyler Glasnow, third on the list with 75. His slider has been absolutely filthy this year. Trevor Bauer with 67, and then Jacob Degrom with 65 there on that list. And then lastly, average against, Jacob Degrom at the top at 128. Freddie Peralta, the next two being Brewers, Peralta and Woodruff, 142 and 144. Certainly impressive. Tyler Glasnow, 146, and Wade Miley. Team's only hitting 147 off of Wade Miley, and of course a no-hitter over 27 outs certainly helps that go way down when it comes to the batting average. But those are your stats, right? Those are your league leaders across the board. Hopefully some of you guys listening learned something or were updated out there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that, but we'll step aside here one last time with the GSMC Baseball Podcast for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. When we come back, let's look at the standings. Let's talk baseball. What's going on out there this week? Stick around, find out.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Let's jump right into it. It took until May 12th, May 11th, May 10th, whatever it is this past week, but we're finally dealing with the COVID-19 virus. Coronavirus is, it's poking its ugly head out once again here, causing some issues across Major League Baseball. Fernando Tatis Jr. as well as Will Myers, two stars of the Padres, tested positive for COVID-19 earlier this week, as well as three other position players are being held out indefinitely as they undergo MLB's contact tracing protocols. These two were put on the list Tuesday night as Myers was removed from the game in the third inning because he got notified of his test in the third inning. So one thing is fascinating, how we still don't have the timing figured out, how before the game we can know if these guys tested positive prior to the start of the game. It's still in the middle of the game before we're getting these results. You would think baseball is figuring out when to test these guys to get the results back before the guy has a couple at-bats in the game and ultimately comes back with a positive. But both guys are asymptomatic and are feeling okay, according to San Diego's manager, so that's a positive. But, again, the Padres shorthanded here for the next couple of days. Ultimately, maybe 10 days, minimum of 10 days they're required to stay on there. They could be activated sooner, but they got to have multiple negative tests and pass a series of protocols, and the guys who are in contact tracing have to do the same. So just a tough break for the Padres here early on, as, again, they're one of the first teams hit where some of their star players have been hit with the virus as well. I mean, Myers and Tatis are in the middle of that lineup, so it's going to be a tough week and a half here for the Padres without those two guys. And the Padres aren't the only team dealing with some virus issues. You also have the New York Yankees, who find themselves in the middle of an outbreak, but it seems to be within the coaching staff. Not so much the player side of things, but the staff side of things. Prior to Wednesday's game, the manager, Aaron Boone, confirmed that 7 staff members had tested positive for COVID-19. Now, the Yankees have voted, and they are still going to take the field, and they're going to play here Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, as long as things don't continue to spread. But it has been acknowledged that third base coach Phil Nevin, first base coach Reggie Willits, as well as pitching coach Mac Blake have tested positive for the virus. And this is a bit of an interesting one with New York, because the New York Department of Health is also starting to look into these cases, because all 7 members who tested positive have taken the single-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Now, 6 of the 7 staff members are asymptomatic, which is part of the vaccine, right? So the vaccine isn't 100% effective of not allowing you to get the virus, but if you do get the virus, you are asymptomatic and avoid hospitalization and avoid the severity of the disease. Now, again, there are antecedent reports that they had tested positive after the vaccine. The DOH is investigating these to determine if they meet the formal CDC definition of a vaccine breakthrough. Again, breakthrough cases are expected. Vaccines are effective and are a critical tool to bring the pandemic under control. However, they are not 100% at preventing illness, and there's a small percentage of people who are fully vaccinated who will still get sick. But again, 6 out of 7 are asymptomatic. So they are looking into it, but it's certainly a storyline to kind of keep an eye out on. As again, they basically said in Major League Baseball, if you hit, I believe it was 85% of your team is fully vaccinated, they ease up on some of the restrictions. I think you're allowed to eat out at restaurants. You're allowed to go out, have a bit more freedom. So that's one of the incentives for teams to get vaccinated, is to not have to sit in quarantine in your hotel on the road here. But just an interesting story there for the Yankees. Meanwhile, shortstop Gleyber Torres says he won't play Wednesday due to an abundance of caution. They didn't get specifics into why he's going to be out, but he's quote-unquote fine. He had the disease in December, has since been vaccinated, but it just kind of sounds like he'd be uncomfortable taking the field with everything going on around him. Let's see, bouncing around. What else is going on? Miguel Cabrera is now tops in Major League Baseball for hits for a Venezuelan-born player. He is fifth inning RBI single here on Wednesday night, was his 2,878th hit of his Major League Baseball career, moving him past Omar Vizquel for 43rd on the all-time hits list and the most by a Venezuelan-born major leaguer. Miguel Cabrera is already the Venezuelan-born major league leader with 489 home runs, 1,735 RBIs, 1,461 runs scored, and 582 doubles. So basically, he's the top Venezuelan-born player in the history of baseball. I mean, when you look at it like that, now has the most hits, home runs, RBIs, runs scored, and doubles, or at least the best offensive Venezuelan-born player. You could argue defensively, of course, Omar Vizquel was a magician out there defensively. But the offensive mastery of Omar Vizquel and Miguel Cabrera just passing him for hits. So next up on the list would be Mel Ott, who currently sits 43rd, and he could potentially be caught by Cabrera next. But shout out to Miguel Cabrera passing Omar Vizquel, the top Venezuelan-born player with the most hits in Major League Baseball history. Next, we got the Seattle Mariners. They ushered in a new era. They called up a couple of their kids. It was finally Jared Kelenic Day. He finally got the call up. Again, this offseason we talked about how the former president, general manager, CEO, whatever his title was, said that they're going to keep him down to manipulate service time, which, again, he is going to fight, and he may actually win this time. Chris Bryant fought the Cubs a few years back, but there was no hard evidence that said they manipulated his time. Well, when you have a guy on tape saying, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing, you have a bit more of a case to potentially win that argument in court. So Jared Kelenic got the call up. He finally made his debut, as well as Logan Gilbert. They were both starting against Cleveland here this week. So it'll be a fascinating time to be a Mariners fan, as both of those guys will make their Major League debut coming up here this week. So Seattle Mariners fans, your team's pretty solid this year, and they're calling up the kids as well. So it's an exciting time to be a Mariners fan. Now, when it comes to negative news, we have to talk about the Houston Astros. Starting pitcher Jose Urquidy was removed from Tuesday's game after only 3 2/3 with a right posterior shoulder discomfort. As of now, he's day-to-day, but they're certainly going to look at and get an MRI to see what lingering offense there could be, and ultimately if he's going to miss more time. There was also a report in Cleveland that the Indians have made extension offers to Shane Bieber the past 2 spring trainings. but Bieber turned both of those down. He is still under team control through 2024 via arbitration. So basically what Cleveland's trying to do, buy out his remaining 3 years or 2 years of arbitration and probably a couple of years into free agency. But Bieber, looking at the market, looking at Trevor Bauer getting $45 million a year, I mean, that contract's going to be, $50 million a year in 3 years if he continues to deal like he has? So there's no incentive for him to kind of jump the gun and buy out some of that free agency time. As well as he's a client of Rosenhaus Sports Representation. So Drew Rosenhaus, we know, represents the top guys, and it's going to be tough to get him under contract. So I don't look for him to sign any deals. I mean, Aaron Nola signed a deal for $45 million over 4 years. A fifth-year club option, bought out his arbitration years, and it looks like a good deal for the Phillies as things continue to move forward here. But Shane Bieber certainly doesn't seem like he's on that same track moving forward. Finally, a story we got to talk about. Drew Robinson, a gentleman who we spoke about in the past. He returned to baseball after a suicide attempt just over a year ago. Well, he hit a home run in a AAA game for the Sacramento River Cats. They're the AAA affiliate of the San Francisco Giants, and the guy's only got one eye. I mean, he's playing baseball with one eye. It's hard enough to hit with two eyes in today's game. I mean, you see that with the averages being, 234 for the year? So Drew Robinson doing it with one eye, able to go yard in a AAA game, showing that he can still play, he can still hit, and this isn't just, we feel bad for the guy's story. He's still playing. He's still got some game left in him, and just a tremendous story. So, little caveat, anybody out there dealing with mental illness, just call somebody. Reach out to somebody, say something. Of course, we're all dealing with it with the pandemic, trying to figure out our place in life as, us millennials, guys in the ages of 20, 30, dealing with some stuff we've never dealt with before. Just reach out to somebody, because stories like this, they're tough to read, tough to talk about, but just wanted to give a shout out to Robinson, who was able to fight his way back and ultimately have a very positive moment of going yard in a AAA game. So next, we're starting to hear rumors of Trevor Story being traded, which we all expect to happen. Of course, the Rockies' new GM, interim GM after letting him go, trading Arenado. Well, Trevor Story's going to be on the move. I mean, they're in the basement in the NL West. He's going to leave in free agency, so there's no reason to hang on to him. So who are the best fits right now for Trevor Story moving forward? Well, there's a couple of names out there that are starting to be floated around. Of course, you got the New York Yankees. Anytime a top player is floated around, the Yankees seem to be involved. And, of course, they got Gleyber Torres at shortstop right now. But some scouts, even most scouts potentially, believe that Torres is better suited for second base. I mean, they moved Odor there at second base, but they have the 18th ranked farm system. Their top prospects are probably untouchable, but that could be an option for Trevor Story. You also got the Oakland A's. I mean, they've been getting horrible production from the shortstop position after Marcus Semien left. Elvis Andrus and Vimael Machan have combined for a 397 OPS. So average plus slugging, or on-base plus slugging, 397. Just a horrible, man, that is bad. I didn't realize it was that bad in Oakland. So they got the 26th ranked farm system, so may not have the ammunition to go get him, but they could certainly use him offensively. The Milwaukee Brewers are a solid landing spot. They're 26th in baseball with runs scored, dealing with some injuries. Christian Yelich, Jackie Bradley Jr., and Hiora also underperforming. They also got issues at shortstop. Luis Urias is struggling out there, so they could potentially look to booster that offense with that pitching staff holding them in contention there in the NL Central. You also got the Cincinnati Reds in that division. They're hanging in there despite kind of an up-and-down start. Edwino Suarez is struggling for them, so they could move Story into that shortstop spot. They got the 20th ranked farm system, so that could be an option. And then lastly, the Tampa Bay Rays. Willie Adames, Joey Wendell, they've struggled at the shortstop spot. They got a top-ranked farm system in Major League Baseball, so they certainly have the ammunition to get a deal done. But it'll just be interesting to see where Story ends up as things continue here over the month of May and June, and teams kind of jockey for position and ultimately who's in the spot to make a move. But looking at the standings here briefly as we wrap up today's episode, in the American League East, the Yankees continue to stay hot. They've won 4 in a row, and since we last talked, the Red Sox have dropped 3 straight. So the Yankees are only a game back in the American League East now, with the Blue Jays also right there at 19 and 16. So all 3 teams with 16 losses, the Red Sox with 22 wins, the Yankees with 20, and the Blue Jays with 19, all could potentially be tied as they finish their makeup games. In the American League Central, the White Sox moved into first place with 4 straight wins. They're a half a game over the Indians, who have bounced back to win 3 straight and are 8-2 over their last 10, so they're separating themselves, as well as the Royals. That hot start, that good start, all for naught. They've lost 10 in a row, and they are now 16 and 19. So a struggle coming here for the Royals. Out west, you got the Athletics and the Astros over 500. Seattle right at 500 after losing 3 straight at 18 and 18. So in the American League, you got Boston, Chicago, and Oakland at the top of their divisions, with the wild card teams right now being the Yankees and Indians, with the Astros and Blue Jays hot on their heels. In the National League, the Mets lead the National League East. They've won 7 straight. They are now 18 and 13 after being 11 and 13. The Phillies have won 2 in a row, so they're a game back at 3 games over 500. In the National League Central, you have the Cardinals at the top of the division at 22 and 15. The Brewers, only 2 games behind them at 20 and 17. And then out west, the Giants, they continue to play fantastic baseball, 22 and 14. 2 games up on the Padres and 3 games up on the Dodgers, who continue to struggle at 19 and 17. So looking at the National League, you got the Mets, Cardinals, and Giants. And then your wild card teams are the Padres, and then the Brewers and Phillies would be playing a wild card playing-in game and having themselves some fun. But that'll do it here for today's episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks for listening, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. We talked about the Oakland A's. Are they going to move? Where are they going to go? Nashville, San Jose, Portland, Charlotte, Salt Lake City, a bunch of options. Or are they finally going to get a stadium done? We talked about college baseball, the top 25, individual performances in Major League Baseball, and then the storylines coming out of the game this week. But before I sign off here, I'll ask you one last time, rate and review the podcast. Follow us on social media. That goes a long way for continuing to help us grow here within the podcast network. But that does it for today. Hopefully you guys are having a fantastic week out there. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. I love talking to you guys. So spread the word. Send this to your friend. I appreciate it. But enjoy the rest of your week, everyone. And I'll talk to you guys again on Monday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.